What's up, tankers? Commander AF taking a break from battle, hanging out with Watt community contributor 13Disciple. You may have seen some of his videos on YouTube, or maybe you hang out in his Twitch channel. And we're here to talk to you today about Equipment 2.0, which was released with Update 1.10 earlier this month, earlier in August, for those of you that might be watching in September. So we just want to go through some tips, tricks, and maybe some pros and cons about Equipment 2.0, some things that maybe you don't know about. Before we jump into all of that, 13, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm 13Disciple, self-proclaimed game mechanics expert and Watt coach. I reached out to our friendly wargaming video team to see if we could do a video on Equipment 2.0 because I think there's some things that the community should be aware of because I know there's a little bit of discomfort with the new UI and some of the changes that happened. So I'm here to try and give you some tips on to better your experience with update 1.10.
And before we get into all of that, I know 13Disciple, you had a question for me. It's a question that I hear
yes.
often.
We're gonna tell you the answer, actually, guys. I know a lot of you have been wondering, what does Commander AF stand for? Stay tuned to the end of the video because I have that answer. So that's your teaser.
Yeah, we've gotten really tight over the short amount of time that we've been discussing Equipment 2.0.
Yep.
All right.
Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it. So before we jump into the tips, maybe we could just give some quick background on how Equipment 2.0 came about. Some of the motivations for the devs will have included making it a little bit more versatile, making the playing ground a little bit more versatile so that you could build out custom loadouts that really suited your play style, so that everyone wasn't constantly playing with the golden rule, the set loadout that traditionally before Equipment 2.0 people would go into battle with. So now there's more opportunities for you to kind of build out your loadout and make it a little bit more competitive and maybe a little easier for newer players to get in the game. In doing so, they also tested out Equipment 2.0 before it was released with the update 1.10. So we had the 2 sandbox test servers. Those are where players from around the community can sign up and download the sandbox server and test out Equipment 2.0 before really anyone else has a chance to, and share their feedback and let the developers at World of Tanks know how they feel about some of the changes, what they think should be changing, what they think is working, what isn't working. And then from there, we had a couple of common tests. So I think we had about 3 over the several weeks leading up to the release of Update 1.10. And then when Update 1.10 dropped in early August, that's when we saw Equipment 2.0. So there was a lot of thought and preparation that has gone into it. There was a lot of feedback and back and forth between players. And I think that conversation is continuing based off what we're seeing around the community. So if you have feedback about Equipment 2.0, don't hold your tongue. Share it with us. We've got forums, we've got Discord, Reddit. There are all sorts of channels for you to communicate with us on your thoughts about Equipment 2.0, because who knows, maybe in the next update we may make the change that you're hoping to see. With that being said, yes, 13Disciple, you did reach out to us with a really big pro tip, a really big benefit of Equipment 2.0 that might not be obvious to the regular player. I certainly was very impressed to hear this, so I'm going to let you take it away and you could talk about our first tip.
Sure. Thanks, Commander. So one of the things you guys might notice as you get into your garages, you'll see on some of the lower tier vehicles, you'll have a piece of equipment with this little arrow on it. What this means is that the equipment that's on this vehicle got upgraded in the patch, meaning this vehicle actually uses a lower tier version of the equipment that you have on the vehicle. So what this means is that once the next patch rolls out, whenever that is, this piece of equipment will be automatically demounted from the vehicle. However, you can prepare for that inevitability before that happens. So let's look at this. So here on my Easy 8, I have a vertical stabilizer which got upgraded. So the current vertical stabilizer is 200,000 credits, and the one that is on here is the class 1, which is 600,000 credits. So instead of just forcing this piece of equipment into the lower tier category, You would have lost credits in that. If you think about it, you paid full price for this vertical stabilizer, and if the update had put it as vertical stabilizer Mark II, class 2, you would have lost credits because this is now a lot cheaper to buy. So what you can do is demount these for free. So you demount to the depot.
And in doing so, you're not able to re-equip that piece now, since it is technically incompatible with the tank. Is that right?
Correct. So that
Right.
piece of equipment is now incompatible, and you can do a couple of things. You can go into your depot and then sell that piece of equipment for, I think, 300,000. So you bought it for 600 and you could sell it for 300,000 now. Or you can just rebuy the lower tier one for a lower cost. That'll be up to each player individually how they want to do it. But the idea is that Wargaming didn't want to penalize you for purchasing expensive equipment up front by downgrading the tier that it's at now.
So are you essentially saying that the equipment wasn't actually downgraded?
No, they weren't
You're-
downgraded. They're pretty much upgraded, basically.
Because you can sell it and now buy more equipment with it, with the profit from that sale.
Correct. So when you had lower tier vehicles that had all three pieces of equipment, they were demounted automatically and sent to your garage, and they were upgraded to the higher tier pieces of equipment. So even though your lower tier tanks lost all their equipment, they can now be re-equipped for much cheaper. And you could even do that by selling a single piece of equipment from a higher tier level. So selling a single pair of optics from tier 10, you could equip several tier 2, 3s, and 4s with optics.
Okay, and well, now I guess speaking of those lower tier vehicles, some of you may have noticed that when Equipment 2.0 came out, not only was the equipment from tier 1 through 3 tanks uh, largely all of the equipment was removed with the exception of a couple of pieces, so all those were demounted for free and sent to your depot. But you'll also notice, I'm going to pull up my screen here, that you also lost some equipment slots and consumable slots, and that was definitely on purpose. So this brings us kind of into our next tip. This is where Equipment 2.0 is making it easier for newer or lower tier players to get better acquainted with equipment and also better acquainted with the game overall. So let me head over to my garage and I'll show you an example of maybe a tier 1 so you can see what I'm talking about. You'll see that in this tier 1 tank, I've got no slots on either side. So I have no equipment slot, I have no consumable slot. Now, you're like, oh, well, what happens when a module takes damage or a crew member is injured? Well, that's not going to happen in a tier 1 battle. Your crew isn't going to be injured. Your tank isn't going to be disabled. You're going to be able to keep moving forward. But as you go up, you're going to see that you will get slots. So in a tier 2 vehicle, for instance, you're going to have 1 equipment slot, 1 consumable slot. You're going to see that your tank or your crew will start taking some injuries depending on how many slots you get. So
At a
tier 2,
reduced
tier
rate,
3,
yeah.
at a reduced rate. Yes, absolutely, at a reduced rate, until you get up to about tier 5, where you'll see that things have largely turned back to normal. You're going to have those 3 equipment slots, 3 consumable slots, and a directive slot.
Tier 4.
Tier 4 doesn't have the directive.
Right. Tier 4
But
is missing the directive, but at tier
Right.
5 and beyond, they
Yes.
have everything available.
And then it's back to normal from tier 5 and up.
Yep.
So, and I hear you clicking around. I can't see what you're doing because I'm looking at my screen. So I'm gonna switch screens and see what you're up to over there, 13Disciple. It's making me think about the new interface updates, the new UI. I've seen some comments around the community about it. I personally think it makes things a lot easier for me to navigate, for me to make decisions. So I'm gonna open this up here. I wanted to also see what you were doing over there,
Sure.
but I can't find my window. Where is my window? There it is. There's my grid. Okay,
Did you find me?
I found you. So do you want to? Can we talk a little bit about the new UI?
Sure. So I've got my Thunderbolt here. I've pulled all the equipment off of it and figured we could take you through it.
Yeah.
So once you click on an equipment slot, you'll notice that your vehicle parameters are still posted on the right-hand side. So when you start throwing pieces of equipment on here, you'll see those bonuses apply live as you put them on. So your first slot, you have a bonus slot to mobility. So if we filter by mobility, there's a few different choices we have here. We have the improved rotation mechanism, which is kind of like a light version of a vertical stabilizer. The turbocharger is an excellent option for medium tanks because it'll help you get around the battlefield more quickly. And I think vents can go into pretty much any improved slot. So that's
Yes.
always a good choice if you're not sure what to put in here. So you'll notice if I choose a vertical stabilizer or a turbocharger for there, and then I go back to the firepower, I can drop a vertical stabilizer in that one and a rammer in that one. And you'll see all of my pieces of equipment update live with the stats on the right-hand side. And you can pull pieces off and add them on and see the changes live in the client now. And let's say I wanted to experiment with these bonuses. You can actually drag and drop these pieces of equipment around into a bonus slot.
Yeah, so that's a really fun fact. I know this was coming up in and around the community that folks didn't realize you don't actually have to demount equipment in order to move them between slots, equipment categories, or consumable slots. You can actually just drag and drop, and there's no demounting involved at that point.
Right.
So
So if we pull
yeah,
up my Fury, you'll notice that I could get a bonus to this vertical or this vents if I put it into the mobility slot. And I can actually do that without having to demount anything, even though that vertical stabilizer still needs to be adjusted later on. But that's just an example of being able to move your equipment around without having to use any demount kits.
and the reason for that is very much so because of the introduction of the specialized slots, those categories that 13 Disciple is talking about, where if you match the category of the slot to the category of the equipment you're applying, you're going to see that you're going to get a bonus in performance.
Okay, so one of the
That-
other things that we can do is we can also do this with ammunition. So you can change your loadouts like this live, pretty simple. And then you can also switch your ammunition. So if you want your premium ammunition to be your first round or your HE to be your second, you can change the organization of all of these very easily.
Love it.
And you can do the same thing with your consumables. So if we move over here, you can also drag and drop your consumables just like that. So you can rearrange their locations. You'll also see a little preview of what you have them mapped to right above them for the keys that they're on. And then you can also change them or remove them entirely. So one last thing I want to point out to you guys is, let's say you're in the middle of 3-marking a vehicle and you're loading this orderly ammo rack for every battle. You got to hit this auto resupply if you want to make sure that you have that in the next battle without having to manually keep adding it in and again.
Pro tip. You heard it there, people. 13 Disciple. Alrighty, and then we've got one more bit of knowledge. I don't know how much, if it's a tip, so to speak, but with Equipment 2.0, I mean, we've got a new number of slots, we've got new equipment categories, and of course we have some new equipment, which is going to give you the chance to really build out really niche loadouts that, like I said earlier, just really can support the playstyle that you're going for. And throughout Reddit, throughout YouTube, you know, we've got a lot of contributors out there that are putting together some really unique builds with all sorts of equipment. We've seen the Zoom Turtle from Quickie Baby, the Unstoppable Mouse from Des Games, Hodor, Night One Rider. They're all putting out some really cool stuff in the community. So if you haven't seen some of those niche builds, you should check them out. But for maybe the free-to-play player, someone who's just kind of getting acquainted with equipment, or at least a new equipment system, I was hoping 13 Disciple that we could talk a little bit about some basic builds that maybe could be your go-to build for now until you start exploring some of the new equipment.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say for most medium tanks, an ideal loadout would probably be the gun rammer, vertical stabilizer. If you can mount that, that's limited on lower tiers, but most higher tier mediums, you'll be able to put that on. And then for the boosted slot, I would highly recommend turbocharger or vents. Those are both two good options that you could put into the boosted slot. If you can't run the vertical stabilizer in the boosted slot, I would absolutely consider putting in the improved rotation mechanism, because that is going to be an act like a vertical stabilizer, while also giving you some good bonuses to your rotation and traverse speed. So one of the other comments that I got a question about was, when do I use the improved aiming mechanism? So let me find a vehicle that works and synergizes with really well. So one of the vehicles that I would recommend running that on would be the ISU 152K. The 152K has pretty weak armor, so it tends to like to sit back and snipe, but with the 750 alpha gun, it has really poor dispersion. So its max dispersion, even with food, is 0.38. So what I would suggest doing is maybe dropping vents and putting on the improved aiming, and that's going to drop it down to 0.37, which will make hitting those long distance shots even easier. I would recommend running the improved aiming on any vehicles, mostly tank destroyers, that are going to be in a position where they're going to be fully aimed almost every shot. This is going to make hitting those shots a little bit easier.
So this might help a vehicle that is either really has poor accuracy, or it can make a vehicle that has really great accuracy even better. And I guess that would be suitable for someone who has like the playstyle of like pixel sniping, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a sniper role where they're fully aiming every shot. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Are there any other basic builds that we could go through that you have in your mind?
Yeah, there's definitely one other build I wanted to point out. So for any of you that are running the Jagdpanzer E100 or the Object 268 V4, there is definitely a new piece of equipment you should consider running, and that is absolutely the modified configuration. Being a casemate TD in a brawling scenario, it's pretty often that you'll get tracked and you'll be sitting out in the open. And one of the benefits that you'll have with the modified configuration is a massive improvement to repair speed. So if you're tracked in the open, you become very, very vulnerable. Whereas the Object 268 V4 benefits greatly from being able to rock back and forth, even in vulnerable positions. That helps keep its weak spot, which is the viewport on the top of the vehicle, in motion, which makes it very difficult to hit, even with targets that are very, very close to you. So the modified configuration is going to keep you mobile for longer. And that is something I'd recommend on almost any casemate TD where you're going to be up front and brawling enemies.
Awesome.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Before you get started, my foot fell asleep. I need to wake it up.
Try coffee. I just pour it right on.
All right, pro tip. Another pro tip, people.
Okay.
All right, I'm good. You may go.
All right. One of the new loadout changes that I highly recommend you consider, and I hesitate to even show this to you guys, it is the improved rotation mechanism for artillery.
Ooh.
So what you'll notice is Artie has never had the opportunity to put vertical stabilizer on, which means that when they rotate their platforms, when they move around the map, they have massive dispersion penalties. What the improved rotation mechanism is going to provide you is that it's going to reduce the dispersion penalties when you're moving your gun around. And that means being able to aim in faster, and it'll be easier to lead opponents that are driving at relatively low speeds. So I would highly recommend, if you're running a gun laying drive on artillery, I suggest dropping the gun laying drive and putting on improved rotation mechanism to maximize your ability to hit those targets that are on the move, or if you're changing targets, it'll be even faster and easier to do it with the improved rotation mechanism.
Awesome.
I shouldn't have said that. We can cut that still, right?
Oh no, it's going in there. It's going in there. 13Disciple loves artillery.
Oh, it's dirty even saying it.
Alrighty, well there you have it, everyone. Commander AF and 13Disciple chatted about Equipment 2.0. We really hope that you learned some new tips, tricks, and just general new loadouts for how to make the most out of Equipment 2.0. I'm dying to know what you guys are experimenting with out there. So put into the comments what is some of the most unique loadouts, the most unique builds that you're finding the most success with in game in the comments below. 13 and I want to know what you guys are working with. And before we sign off, 13Disciple, share with everyone in the World of Tanks community what you've got going on and where they can find out more from you.
Absolutely. Thanks. So I just put out a video that describes how to bush snipe in 3 minutes. So in the description below, you'll see a link to that and the rest of the videos on the channel. A lot of my content is focused on teaching you guys how to get a little bit better at World of Tanks. So if you like that kind of stuff, head over there. Again, I am a self-proclaimed game mechanics expert. So if you guys have any questions relating to Equipment 2.0 or anything else with World of Tanks, you can always find me live on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday in the evenings. And before I let you go, Commander AF, we have to tell our faithful viewers here what AF stands for. All right. Commander AF stands for Armored Fax Machine,
No.
Astronaut Farmer,
Nope.
Ant Photographer,
That doesn't even start with F.
Ancient Flatulence,
That stinks. No way.
Animal Fiduciary,
Nope.
Auditory Fiasco,
Nope.
Apricot Fascist,
No. No, not at all.
Airplane Food,
Ooh. Good or bad, but no.
Angry Flamingo,
No, but I will tell you what Commander AF stands for. You ready?
yes, lay it on me. I want to know.
All right, drum roll. Commander AF stands for Commander, Commander,